In today's show, trades, tanking, and Rayan Rupert getting remixed. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, so make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. As Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, a good old-fashioned smorgasbord. Talking a little bit of everything. Got some trade talk, the latest in a quiet but heating up market as we get there. Inch closer to the trade deadline, less than 3 weeks away. We'll talk about trades and the Blazers' place in that trade chatter. We'll talk tanking. There was a whole bunch of NBA games today on MLK Day here in the United States, and implications for the losers, for those teams at the bottom of the standings or considering heading there themselves. We'll talk about that. And then Rayan Rupert heads to the remix, made his G League debut as the Blazers used their first assignment of an NBA roster guy, the only one that is really in the running for that. Rayan Rupert plays some G League minutes. We'll talk about what he did in his minor league action on a Monday. Let's start with the trade talk. There isn't a lot of hot Blazer goss, right? I would bring it to you. The name that has been most widely reported and most consistently reported by the most plugged-in outlets, including my boy Timmy Goodtimes, Tim Bontemps at ESPN, as well as Jake Fisher and Mark Stein at the Stein line, is that if there is a player that teams are inquiring about and believe is gettable and has drawn interest from teams across the league on the Blazers roster, it's Rob Williams. That remains the case. All of the other sort of tradable vets have their own obvious warts. Anthony Simons is like a specific type of scorer for a team that could handle what he doesn't do well and doesn't really need him to play point guard and blah, 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 blah. Jeremy Grant has just a bunch of money left on his contract, and he has really struggled this year, not super appealing. DeAndre Ayton at his price point is not really a trade candidate. And Matisse Thybulle, like in theory, he could be the something like the 8th or 9th best player on a good team, 9th or 10th, 8th or 10 maybe on a really good team. But like he hasn't played this year. So he's not really in the trade chatter because he has yet to be available, and everyone else on the Blazers roster is either like a young player that wouldn't factor into trade stuff, or it's conceivably part of the Blazers core that they're not interested in trading, although I would imagine you still get calls on basically everyone. Somebody calls someone and says, what would it take to get Shaedon Sharpe? Okay, bye. In any case, the name to know for Blazer fans for who might be traded seems like the number one most likely option remains Rob Williams. What it would be for Rob Williams, I think is something of, it's not 100% clear, but I would say with the names that he is bandied about with, you don't hear any of them. You rarely hear the word first round pick. It's like, hopefully you're getting a protected first for Rob. I think that's the most hopeful. It's like, okay, something like, top 17, top 18 protected pick, like even outside the lottery, right? It's like you can get a back half of the first round type of pick, but I think I think a juicy second is probably what you're aiming for, right? You're trying to say, like, give us the 32nd pick in the NBA draft. That would be what you're asking for in these deals, or a boatload of picks. Blazers, They moved off some picks last year, second rounders last year, so we'll see what their appetite in general is for hoarding second rounders, but they can be useful for greasing the wheels more so than maybe replenishing the roster itself. But I think Rob's trade value we'll just find out what it looks like. Although again, like I've said this before, just pure speculation. I don't think you're getting a juicy first round pick. I think the best case scenario is a protected one, and I think as we get closer, maybe even protected so much it lasts. It's a second rounder, or multiple seconds is obviously what the deal would be. A single second for Rob wouldn't make any sense. From the Blazers' perspective, you could argue that even like 2 seconds wouldn't make sense, but I I think at some point you have to deal with what the market suggests your assets are actually worth. But that's you could disagree with that. I feel like that's a reasonable place to disagree. What really we're waiting on in the NBA is Jimmy Butler to get traded. That seems to be the biggest news that everyone's reporting. Some of that is just like the nature of how reporting works in the modern world, is that that's the thing that you'll click on the internet or on an app or whatever. But like Jimmy Butler has no interest in playing for the Miami Heat, even though he's back and playing and kind of fine. The Heat, it seems, are no longer interested in doing long-term business with Jimmy Butler and are motivated to make sure that he finds a home ahead of the trade deadline, lest he either walk in free agency or they find themselves still in the Jimmy Butler business next year. And they're like, well, how did we end up in this trap? But the problem with trading Jimmy Butler is that he makes a ton of money, and he also wants to be paid a ton of money on the back end. So the list of places that are interested in him is relatively limited. And then a team that was actually interested in trading for him is the Memphis Grizzlies. He was like, don't trade for me. I don't want to go to Memphis. So I'll go anywhere, but not there. So in any case, Butler seems to be the big holdup. And I think what the reporting suggests now, and this is from both Brian Windhorst of ESPN and also Jake Fisher at the Stein line, as well as Mark Stein, and that duo there, the newsbreakers and brokers of the world, we don't really get any iterative reporting from Shams Charania. We just get finish line stuff from him these days. In any case, there is, to make a Jimmy Butler trade work, it's likely going to be a big old trade. 3, 4, 5 teams involved with multiple moving parts. And because of the way that the new CBA works, you're most likely trading, these teams are going to be trading one singular big contract here and then one singular big contract here, as opposed to aggregating and as opposed to putting multiple players into the mix. It's like Phoenix can trade one player, and then that one player goes to Milwaukee. Brad Beal goes to Milwaukee, but Milwaukee needs to trade Pat Connaughton to be able to facilitate it. And then so it's like there's a bunch of singular moving parts. So I think it's where we're moving towards is likely, if it happens, a large 4+ team trade to make a big deal happen. And because it's a 4+ team trade, some teams at the bottom of the standings or the middle of the standings, depending on who they are, can get involved as facilitators. And there's been some reporting, including from Brian Windhorst of ESPN and also the folks at the Stein line, that Detroit, the only team in the league with cap space, the team with the most financial flexibility of any team in the league, who made some moves this year, including with my guy B-Ball Paul, cutting him and then re-signing him to create their amount of cap space. Detroit is a team that is willing to facilitate these bigger deals, and Detroit is going to probably benefit in some way, usually draft capital as a little bonus, from being able to team that can facilitate, absorb a contract. And the Toronto Sun reported that, the Toronto Star reported that the Raptors are also a team that is interested in facilitating should there be a larger trade. Mark Stein of the Stein line reported that many teams have also said we would be willing to do it as well, but those teams have a little more flexibility, particularly Detroit. Detroit's got $14 million in cap space. Toronto is $10 million below the tax line, so that's you can absorb a salary as needed. You could absorb Pat Connaughton's $9.4 million salary to facilitate what the Bucks need to move on from there, right? To get the Bucks out of the second apron so then they can make moves beyond that. There are facilitators out there. How this links to the Blazers is that they are not. They are just simply not a facilitator right now. They're about $3.7 million, according to SpotTrack's numbers, away from the tax line, which makes it hard to facilitate trades. It makes it hard to send out players that the Blazers have and bring back bad money, because it's you're talking $3.5 million. You aren't probably doing enough teams enough favors at $3.5 million to make it work, because the Blazers are certainly not going to be a tax team with this current roster. So I think this speaks to kind of how the Blazers' preferences over the last few seasons. They have not at any point in the trades that they have made over the last 2 years prioritized expiring money. They have prioritized getting players under contract. DeAndre Ayton, Toumani Camara, Malcolm Brogdon, Rob Williams. To some extent, I guess Delano Banton, although it was non-guaranteed. But it's they've prioritized when they have made trades, not big expiring onerous contracts, but players that are under team control and have some appeal, at least in their eyes, on the court, as well as in future trades in theory. I don't think that's really played out yet, because the Blazers haven't made these moves. They attached 2 freaking first-round picks to get off Malcolm Brogdon. It wasn't like this juicy trade chip they ended up having, but the juicy trade chip was the first-rounders, to be sure. So the Blazers just aren't in a position to benefit in the way that these other teams have. You look at a team like Charlotte that has in some ways benefited. Like, they got basically netted 2 second-round picks for trading for Josh Okogie. They paid Josh Okogie makes a little more money than Nick Richards, who they sent to the Suns, but they got two second-round picks, netted 2 second-round picks in that deal. You could argue that there's some value there. They also received some second-round picks for helping facilitate over the summer the Karl Anthony Towns trade to the Knicks. Like, the Hornets have paid and got some surplus seconds for their position with a little more financial flexibility in a way that a team like the Blazers has been unable to do because they have a very expensive roster despite being one of the worst teams in the league. You could argue that second-round picks don't matter, and I think that's actually a fair argument to make. But you could also argue that, like, giving yourself, that putting yourself in a position to get some sort of assets for being bad and also being a little bit cheaper, like what would be the difference, and getting some assets along the way for facilitating that and being a little bit cheaper and being a landing spot for the Josh Okogies of the world that then you can like also flip for another second round pick that never conveys. Like you could, there's some upside to it. Not that like you're going to find Nikola Jokic in the second round. Like I'm not offering that. I'm saying that like those types of seconds can eventually be used and say like, hey, we need to get one more role player to push us over the top into the future. And if you trade for, some future seconds and you have this surplus of second round picks, you've got more juice to make trades. And increasingly in the apron world, second rounders, rookie contracts count differently against the tax than veteran minimums. So really good teams are increasingly interested in getting a second rounder because like the Phoenix Suns did in their trade with Nick Richards, because that allows them serious tax savings in the future. And really good teams are going to need that serious tax savings in the future in the new punitive world of the CBA. The Blazers just aren't set up to do that. So we're waiting on Jimmy as the big trade, and the Blazers are probably not going to be involved in the big trade that happens. But if they do make a move, Rob Williams is the name to watch. Let's talk about tanking. Let's talk about losing. Some fun NBA games that happened today on MLK Day, and there were some implications across the league that affect the Blazers in their quest to collect those highly coveted ping pong balls. Let's talk ping pong balls, losing in the rest of the league. Join me in that second segment. First, though, let's talk FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And from the final whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel app is easy to navigate. There's a variety of bets that can help keep games exciting if that's your thing. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or your favorite team's gone home because we're down to just 4 of them in the NFL playoffs, or you want to look to add some extra excitement to the final weekend of multi-team postseason. I guess the Super Bowl includes multiple teams, but you know what I mean. 4 teams remaining. FanDuel's got you covered for all of that while we've still got 4 teams left on the docket. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. This morning, by the time I checked in to my day job, there was an NBA game that already started. We got a 9 a.m. tip-off. Mavs and Hornets. Sure, I'll tune in. I didn't watch the whole game because I couldn't spend 2.5 hours with that end and be a reasonable employee, but I did watch the end of the game. It got close, and your beloved Bugs pulled it out to win their 3rd straight game. The Charlotte Hornets improved to 11-28. After an 8-28 start, they've now reached double-digit wins. Somebody break up the Bugs. Here they go. Here's the problem, though. Earlier during this winning streak, second-year wing Brandon Miller sustained a torn ligament in his right wrist, and he's probably done for the season. So even though the Hornets are playing better as of this week, they have 11 total wins. 3 of them have come in the last 7 days. There's probably only so much they can do now that they just they're going to have a lot more Nick Smith Jr. in the game than they would have otherwise. That's it's a bummer for Brandon Miller because you want folks to be healthy, and it's probably a bummer for all 17 Hornets fans out there. Just kidding. Go listen to Doug and Walker on Locked on Hornets. They do a genuinely very good job. Two of my faves on the network. But like the Hornets know who they are, and missing Brandon Miller stinks. But it is it's going to aid their quest to lose more games because you're just missing a quality player on a team light on those. That's a bummer for the Blazers because you would rather the Hornets like just have all their parts, and they're already 3 wins. You already got 3 more wins in Portland than they do in Charlotte. So you're chasing it, and having them lose a good player means you are continuing to chase it. But again, your beloved Bugs, winners of 3 in a row. I don't think anyone's catching Washington in the battle for the bottom. The Blazers sit at 14-28 with the 7th worst record in the NBA right now as I'm recording this. The Clippers and Bulls are playing right now. The game has not ended. It's in the 4th quarter. So I won't have it up to the seconds, but the Clippers they're down 13 with 7 minutes left. So Clippers 4-game win streak looks like it's going to get snapped here, and the Bulls will end up with 19 wins. So the Bulls are going to be terrible and make the play-in because the Eastern Conference is such a joke. But the Blazers sit with the 7th worst record in the league. I have said and maintained all year, and I'm going to just reiterate it now, is that I think, for all they're winning too much stuff, I kind of get that. I get that. I understand as much as I rail against tanking, I understand the sort of pragmatic necessity of losing basketball games. And I have maintained all year long in public and in private being a certain local podcaster who has texted me several times about it. But like that, if the Blazers finish with the 5th worst record in the league, one of the 5 worst records in the league, I'm not going to complain. I think that's fine. The sweet spot is obviously one of the bottom 3 records in the league, but it's like Scoot Henderson's playing the best basketball of his career right now. If Scoot Henderson actually helps you win basketball games, that's the thing that makes you finish 5th and not 3rd. You need that, right? You need the young players to show some level of step in the right direction. It's very different if DeAndre Ayton and Jeremy Grant are powering you to wins that you don't want. It's a very different flavor. But if it's the youngsters, if it's the young core, I think you just kind of got to live with it. If the Blazers finish with one of the 5 worst records in the league, I don't think you can complain about it. But the race to get there is getting a little bit thicker. Like I said, I don't think anybody's catching Washington. They're 6-35, rolling a 10-game losing streak. They're pretty much. I don't think you're catching them. I don't think you're catching Utah. Utah currently 10-31, losers of 3 in a row, 3-7 in their last 10. They are just so deeply committed. So I watched the end of that Hornets-Mavs game this morning, but this evening I watched the 4th quarter and overtime of the Jazz and Pelicans. Indeed, I stopped watching the national championship game to watch the end of Jazz-Pelicans because I love you, dear listener. Or maybe I hate myself, or maybe I just like the NBA. Hard to know. The Jazz dropped a 25-point lead. CJ McCollum scored 45 points, including 30-plus. I believe it was 32, they said on the broadcast, after halftime. In the second half and overtime, 32 points for CJ McCollum, 45 in the game, and the Pelicans had the biggest comeback in franchise history to beat the Jazz. But here's why I don't think you're catching the Jazz. Colin Sexton sat out this game due to rest. My man just needed rest. He needed rest because the Jazz this week played Brooklyn, Charlotte, New Orleans. They had the tank week of their lives, and they needed to make sure that they accomplished their mission. Then, in the final possession of overtime, CJ McCollum puts a shot up, comes off the rim. Daniel Tice gets the rebounds, and the Pelicans cycle it back out, and the Jazz are forced to foul. Trey Murphy makes both free throws to push the New Orleans lead to 4, and the Utah Jazz have a timeout and a little less than 8 seconds left, and they choose not to use their timeout, and they just come down and dribble and hoist up a 3. The only chance you have of winning the game is calling a timeout, taking a quick 3, and playing the foul game. But Jazz coach Will Hardy knows what the deal is. His job is to lose, so he didn't call a timeout. We're in January, and the Jazz are like fully committed to the bid. I don't think you're catching the Jazz. They're doing the thing. Toronto at 10-32, currently with the second worst win percentage in the league. I've kind of been waiting for them to get healthy and win games. Like, I think they have NBA players that are like at least decent. I think Kelly Olynyk has been awful for them. I kind of thought he was like a useful backup big, and whenever he got healthy, they were going to be good. but quickly and RJ Barrett's. And it's like I thought they had enough parts to not be like this bad. Obviously, their depth is pretty dicey, but I didn't think they would be this awful. And they've had a bunch of injuries that has obviously not helped, and all of those things. I'm a big Jakob Poeltl believer, but he's kind of cooled down after he was helpful for them, or really really balling at the beginning of the season, very first couple weeks. I guess Toronto's going to stay down there, but I think they're catchable in theory. New Orleans is a team heading in the right / wrong direction. New Orleans is just getting a little healthier. Still no Brandon Ingram, but Zion Williams is back and playing some games. Trey Murphy's back in the lineup. Herb Jones done for the year, but you got Zion, you got Trey, you got CJ McCollum, you got DeJounte Murray, who's been really bad for them after coming over in the trade, but he's better than he's been, so you think he can improve, right? They just have enough NBA players to win some games. They've actually won what will be, if the Clippers do not come back in this Bulls game, they'll have the longest winning streak in the NBA in New Orleans at 4 games in a row. They're good enough to get out of the way. Charlotte is in trouble. Brooklyn is really committed to it. They won too many games early, but they're really committed to it. So that would put Washington, Toronto, Utah, Charlotte as 4 teams that are. And throw Brooklyn in between the Blazers. Those are the 5 teams that the Blazers would need to leapfrog one of them. Brooklyn, who both Brooklyn and Portland have 14 wins. Leapfrog one of them to get to that 5 spot, where I have said I'm not going to fret too much if they end up with one of the 5 worst records in the league. They're in position to do it. It's not, they're going to have to lose and lose heavy, because those teams are going to lose and lose heavy. But I don't think the fretting about oh no, they're so screwed. Look at the standings. The Blazers are in an okay place. Those of you who are rooting for ping pong balls, are they in an ideal place? No. Obviously, they've won 2 more games than you want them to. Heck, they might have even won 4 more games than you want them to. But, it's when Scoot Henderson has 25-8 and they win a basketball game, it's hard to be this is bad. That is specifically what you want this team to be, is winning because of that. Here's the other thing to watch. Does Philly get in the mix? Joel Embiid is he's going to be reevaluated in a couple weeks with swelling in his knee. If you're familiar with the Joel Embiid oeuvre, he's probably going to miss some time, more than just a couple weeks. And they're awful. In addition to Joel, Paul George has struggled to stay healthy. They just haven't had their group together. They're extremely top heavy, right? That's the whole thing, is they were going to have Maxey and George and Embiid, and they were going to be able to be competitive because they had 3 excellent players. If none of those dudes are available, it's tough. They can't tank, though, because they owe a top 6 protected pick to the Thunder. Philly currently has the 8th worst record in the league. They're 15-26, just 1 more win than the 14-28 Trailblazers. If Philly really committed to it, they could get in the mix for 5, right? For 5, they could get and mess with the Blazers, system and get in the mix for 5 for sure. But Philly would have to probably tank lower than 5 to have it be worth it, because if you end up at 5 or you end up at 6, then you need really good lottery luck to keep your odds. It's a tough needle to thread. It doesn't mean they won't do it. It just means that if Philly is going to do it, they're probably going to need to commit to that path within the next week or so. So pay very close attention to what's going on in Philly over the next 10 days, because if they do commit to the tank, again, a very tough needle to thread. I think it's pretty unlikely that they do that. I think they just are going to suck and they're going to lose enough games, and that'll be that, right? But if they to get where they need to go to end up with one of the top 6 picks in the draft, it'll be tough for them, and they probably have to commit to it. So pay attention, because they're a team to watch. Otherwise, I think the Blazers are one of the 7 worst teams. I think those are the 7 worst teams. I think New Orleans is probably going to climb out of that group of the 7 worst teams. So then you're talking about the 6 bottom teams in the NBA. 6 bottom teams in the NBA: Washington, Toronto, Utah, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Portland. 6 teams, 5 spots. Maybe you're saying 6 teams, 3 spots. 6 teams, in my eyes, 5 spots. If you finish 5th, 42% of a top 4 pick, 10% chance of the top overall pick. Obviously, it's not the best odds, but I could see where that, to me, that's the cutoff to where it's this was all of this, all the shenanigans and what the dragging their feet was worth it. If not, I'm not gonna curse them if they finish 7th, but I do think it will feel a lot less worth it if this is a team picking a team with the 7th best odds going into the lottery. We'll see, but obviously lottery luck can play itself out. Okay, Rayan Rupert playing the G League. Let's talk about it. Join me in the 3rd segment, won't ya? First, though, let's talk about Prizepicks. It's the place to get real money action on the sports you are already watching. So if you are watching basketball as we zoom past the midway point in the season and we head towards the trade deadline and beyond, why not check out Prizepicks? It's a fun and easy way to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You think Scoot's got another 20-piece in him? You think Shaedon Sharpe is going to keep rolling in a bench roll moving forward? Well, Prizepicks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. What I like about Prizepicks is, sure, you get all your picks right. You can win up to 1,000 times your cash, but sometimes you're going to be wrong, and that's why they've got flex play. So even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money. Plus, once you win, you can get your money fast, sometimes as quickly as 15 minutes. It's a great way to keep the games exciting if that's your type of excitement. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the app and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. You don't even need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks. Run your game. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. Still listening to Locked On Blazers. Talk trades. Talk tanking. Now let's talk remix. Rayan Rupert assigned to the Rip City Remix as the Blazers G League affiliate as the first assignment of the NBA season for the Portland Trailblazers all the way in January. But Rupes heads down to an MLK daytime showcase game out there at the Chiles Center and does his thing. Rupes, when you go down there as an NBA guy, they're going to give you the rock and they're going to give you shots and you're going to get to kind of expand your game, spread your wings. You get to be liquid, right? Whatever, they're going to give you the G League vessel, and as much of that thing you can fill up, they're going to let you fill it up. He finishes with 27 points, 5 boards, 7 assists, turned the ball over 5 times, was 10 of 20 from the floor, 0 of 4 from 3, and hit 4 free throws. Led the team in field goal attempts, second on the team in free throw attempts. 7 assists and 27 points. Like he did his thing. I don't think it matters, but they did lose by 23. This is the right move. And for my money, I'm surprised Rupes didn't go down there earlier. I kind of get why he didn't in the grand scheme of things. There were times this year when, because of injuries and availability and stuff, like Shaedon Sharpe's injured early, and then you get time here and there from some of the wing guys that aren't necessarily available. It's like there were times this season when Rupert just needed to be around the team because of insurance, right? Like somebody twists an ankle in the second quarter, even if it's a not serious injury, but they just can't come back in the game. You're kind of going to say, like, hey, Rayan, we need you to play 4.5 minutes right now. Like there's been times when they just straight up needed him, his availability. I'd have to like really look back at the schedule concurrent with the Rip City Remix schedule to be like, here's a day they could have sent him down there. But the Blazers really haven't this is the first player they've assigned all season long. They really haven't utilized the G League this year. Some of that is because of the nature of the team. They didn't draft any second rounders. That's typically a more likely, late first and second round guys who aren't like high investment players who are going to play in the NBA. There is no value in sending Donovan Clingan to the G League. He needs to play NBA games. Like he needs to play against the highest level competition, and he was honestly really good early in the years, and then had a rockier stretch after that than the way he started. So it wasn't like in his early games like, oh, he needs to play in the G League. It was like, he had some very early in the season. He had one of his best performances. Had his best performance earlier in the season. So there wasn't. When we're talking about utilizing the G League, we're talking about Rayan Rupert. He is a guy who's a young player, a young man, out of the rotation, not needed for positional depth necessarily on a ton of nights. There are just doesn't have much opportunity. Rayan Rupert took 20 shot attempts for the Rip City Remix. 20 shot attempts in his 32 minutes and 15 seconds. He's taken 19 shots in the NBA since December 1st across 13 games and mostly playing garbage time. He's mostly mop-up duty at the end of blowouts, at the end of losses. Oh, do you want to go play 3.5 minutes? Do you want to go play the final 78 seconds of a game? You can go 0 for 1 in a game that's already decided, right? Like, those aren't valuable minutes. And when you have youngsters, like Tumani is young, Denny is young, and Roops is really a wing. He's not a ball handling type. So, those guys are young. Jeremy Grant, if he's available, eats up and plays a ton of minutes. Chris Murray is clearly deserving. Maybe they were neck and neck early in the season, but Murray has kind of shown that he's more productive than Rupert when he plays, for my money. Murray was ahead of him, had leapfrogged him. If you're going to play another guy, like Jabari Walker is ahead of him, probably in the sort of like, we need someone to play power forward pecking order, because Rupert's certainly more of like a 2-3, right? Shane Sharp is going to play. Scoot Henderson's going to play, and every time he's going to play, like, there's just not minutes for him. We're talking about Roops. They haven't used him. Players utilized the G League a little bit last year with Rupert and both with Chris Murray, but again, that's a second-round pick and a late first-round pick. They didn't have that this year. Rupert is the only candidate to go down. But I would say in general, the Blazers just haven't utilized the G League. In addition, the G League's not a true minor league system. It's your two-way contract guys go down there, but the other folks like that you see on the remix roster, like the James Bouknights and the Alex Reeses, my guy Sterling Manley from Carolina, like those are minor league players. The Blazers would have to create a space for them, either via two-way or calling them up on a 10-day contract, but they don't have space on the roster to do that. But if they had like a injury situation and were able to get a hardship waiver, but like they don't have roster spots to call these guys up. You'd have to waive a two-way guy and sign players to two-way deals to make that happen. Like, it's not a true minor league system. So it's not like you utilize the G League and grow players into NBA players. It just isn't, that's not really how the NBA's minor league system works. In fact, like I would say the closest thing the Blazers have done that is Taze Moore. And he spent most of last season, before signing a 10-day with the Blazers, playing on the Dallas G League team. He was playing for the Legends, and the Blazers scouted him and said he can be useful. They traded for his G League rights and then signed him to a 10-day contract. The scouting happens across the league as opposed to in your backyard. It's not really an incubator program, very specifically one-to-one from NBA to the G League, and the Blazers haven't really utilized it as such. For instance, if you're curious about this, like the Jazz have more players that fit the bill, and thus have I think the Jazz are in a pretty similar position to the Blazers with the sort of the vets and youngsters on a team that wants to lose. They've sent 4 guys down to play games in the G League. Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, and Cody Williams have all spent time in the G League, right? Like the Blazers have chosen not to do that, some because they've needed the insurance of having Rupert on the bench, and some because they just don't have 4 candidates to go down to the G League. But I think this makes sense for Rupert. I think he is better off getting real minutes, getting real shots up, getting real reps, even against lower level competition. And certainly it speaks to what level the G League is that Rupert goes down there and gets a pretty clean 27 because the line between able to contribute in the NBA and can light it up in the G League that is a fine line, right? There are points to be had in the G League, but that step up in competition is very serious once you get there. And also you're not going to get to shoot 20 times in the NBA game if you're a Rayan Rupert. This is good for the Blazers. I'm glad they're utilizing it. I hope they do it more in the future because Rupert, from my view, is probably better utilized getting real minutes and playing real games in the minor leagues than watching in the NBA. But I understand the necessity of the way the roster works. There might be nights when they just need him. They just need him to be on the bench for insurance purposes because he is an NBA roster guy, an NBA player by virtue of his contract. So some nights you're just going to need him there because you need him to play. But good for Roops. I'm glad he got down there and got to play. Glad he had a big box score night, and hopefully he continues as the remix continues a couple more games this week, getting some run and showing that he can the progress that he's made at this lower level, because he doesn't really right now, as the roster stands, have much opportunity to. I am fairly certain that will change at some point. That's going to do it for today's show. Come back for tomorrow's program. This is what we do. Blazers play in Miami as they head through Florida and then back up to Charlotte on a 3-game road trip this week. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That's Miami, Orlando, and then Charlotte. So we'll have you covered for all of that. That's what we do 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.